But what bums me out is to know that a lot of kids today are just wishing to be happy, to be healthy, to be safe, not bullied, and be loved for who they are. So it seems to me when adults say, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" they just assume that you'll automatically be happy and healthy. But maybe that's not the case. Go to school, go to college, get a job, get married, boom. Then you'll be happy, right? We don't seem to make learning how to be happy and healthy a priority in our schools. It's separate from schools. And for some kids, it doesn't exist at all. But what if we didn't make it separate? What if we based education on the study and practice of being happy and healthy? Because that's what it is, a practice, and a simple practice at that. Education is important, but why is being happy and healthy not considered education? I just don't get it. So I've been studying the science of being happy and healthy. It really comes down to practicing these 8 things: exercise, diet, nutrition, time in nature, contribution, service to others, relationships, recreation, relaxation and stress management, and religious or spiritual involvement. Yes, got that one. So these 8 things come from Dr. Roger Walsh. He calls them therapeutic lifestyle changes, or TLCs for short. He's a scientist that studies how to be happy and healthy. In researching this talk, I got a chance to ask him a few questions like, do you think that our schools today are making these 8 TLCs a priority? His response was no surprise. It was essentially no. But he did say that many people do try to get this kind of education outside of the traditional arena, through reading and practices such as meditation or yoga. But what I thought was his best response was that much of education is oriented, for better or worse, towards making a living rather than making a life.
Once last year I got armor and a sword. I found a dog and played with him. I built a house and made a garden. Night came and monsters were everywhere. There was an evil lord that I started killing. Just as I was about to destroy him, time to line up. Hello, my name is Simon Link, and I'm talking about why kids should have an hour-long recess. Did you know that genes change when they get playtime? Out of 1,200 genes that scientists have studied, 1/3 of them have changed when they had a half-hour playtime. Since the 1800s, research shows that you learn better and faster when having playtime. Work that has breaks is more effective than work with long stretches. Some colleagues visited a school that had no recess. They asked them to have recess twice a week so that they could watch them and see what they were like. They were more focused and less fidgety on days when they had recess. Stress impacts on learning and health. For many children, especially those considered hyperactive, recess is an opportunity to expend energy in a healthy, suitable manner. Recess develops social skills. Recess may be the only time of the day when children have an opportunity to experience socialization and real communication. The outside light triggers the synthesis of vitamin D, which many studies have shown increases academic learning. The outdoors is the best place for children to burn calories, practice emerging physical skills, and experience the pure joy of movement. According to Ray Pica, who is a children's physical activity specialist, recess may be research even shows that you learn. Research even shows that when having physical activity at school, you usually have more physical activity at home, and children who don't have the opportunity to be physically active during the school day don't usually compensate during the after-school hours. Running around helps the brain. Thanks to advances in brain research, we know that most of the brain is activated during physical activity, much more so than being a couch potato. Now, stand up and do 10 jumping jacks when I say go. Go! 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now sit down. I imagine a world where every child gets lots of playtime. I hope that if you have children, you will make sure that those children get lots of playtime. Thank you.
One way to change our genes is to make new ones, as Craig Venter has so elegantly shown. Another is to change our lifestyles. And what we're learning is how powerful and dynamic these changes can be, that you don't have to wait very long to see the benefits. When you eat healthier, manage stress, exercise, and love more, your brain actually gets more blood flow and more oxygen. But more than that, your brain gets measurably bigger. Things that were thought impossible just a few years ago can actually be measured now. This was figured out by Robin Williams a few years before the rest of us. Now, there's some things that you can do to make your brain grow new brain cells. Some of my favorite things like chocolate and tea, blueberries, alcohol in moderation, stress management, and cannabinoids found in marijuana. I'm just the messenger. What were we just talking about? And other things that can make it worse. It can cause you to lose brain cells, the usual suspects like saturated fat and sugar, nicotine, opiates, cocaine, too much alcohol, and chronic stress. Your skin gets more blood flow when you change your lifestyle, so you age less quickly. Your skin doesn't wrinkle as much. Your heart gets more blood flow. We've shown that you can actually reverse heart disease, that these clogged arteries that you see in the upper left, after only a year, become measurably less clogged. And the cardiac PET scan shown in the lower left, the blue means no blood flow. A year later, orange and white is maximal blood flow. We've shown you may be able to stop or reverse the progression of early prostate cancer, by extension, breast cancer, simply by making these changes. We found that tumor growth in vitro was inhibited 70% in the group that made these changes, whereas only 9% in the comparison group. These differences were highly significant. Even your sexual organs get more blood flow, so you increase sexual potency. One of the most effective anti-smoking ads was done by the Department of Health Services, showing that nicotine, which constricts your arteries, can cause a heart attack or a stroke, but it also causes impotence. Half of guys who smoke are impotent. How sexy is that? Now, we're about to publish 2 new studies, one in collaboration with Dr. Elizabeth Blackburn, who won a Lasker Prize a couple of years ago for discovering telomerase. Telomerase is an enzyme that repairs telomeres, which are the ends of your chromosomes that control how long you live, obviously pretty important. And what we showed is that simply in just 3 months, by making these simple changes, you can actually increase your telomerase, thereby lengthening your telomeres and living longer. And we're also about to publish a study, the first study showing you can change gene expression in men with prostate cancer. This is what's called a heat map, and the different colors, and along the side on the right are different genes. And we found that over 500 genes were favorably changed, in effect turning on the good genes, the disease-preventing genes, turning off the disease-promoting genes. And so these findings, I think, are really very powerful. They're giving many people new hope and new choices. And companies like Navigenics and DNA Direct and 23andMe that are giving you your genetic profiles are getting some people a sense of, gosh, well, what can I do about it? Well, our genes are not our fate. And if we make these changes, they're a predisposition. But if we make bigger changes than we might have made otherwise, we can actually change how our genes are expressed. Thank you. A few days ago. And so when you can meet an unmet need that's as primal as the need for connection and caring and love and community and meaning and trust, that will make you much more successful. But it brings meaning because you're not just making money, you're creating a healing experience for the people that you interact with. And if you look at all of the spiritual traditions, they all have, lots of different things that people fight over. But when you get to the essence of it, what Aldous Huxley called the perennial philosophy, it's all about altruism and forgiveness and compassion and love. What do those things all have in common? They bring us together. I remember the very first study that I did 35 years ago as a medical student. I had 10 men and women in a hotel for a month. And one of them was a guy who hated gay people, and of course one of the other men was gay. And so when they first met, the guy said something insulting to the other. He said something equally insulting back. One got chest pain, took a nitroglycerin. The other got chest pain, took a Demerol. They both slammed the door. I thought they're both going to die, and this is going to be the end of my very short research career. But I talked to them. I said, you're giving the power to give you chest pain and maybe even a heart attack and die to the guy that you hate the most. That's not really smart, even from your own self-interest. And so we need to get away from this idea. Is it selfish or is it unselfish to be forgiving, to be compassionate, to be altruistic? Look what Mark is doing with the Benioff Children's Hospital. That's something that gives him great meaning, as it gives great meaning to all of us who support that. Because so I talked to them and I said, I want you to be more compassionate with each other. Not that it condones or excuses what this guy is doing, but it frees you from the suffering and the pain of having that hatred. Because hatred, as it turns out, is the most toxic emotion, not just to the other people, but to you.
Well, the first thing that I would suggest if you're trying to start a self-healing journey of your own is believe that anything is possible. You have to be able to believe that it's possible to cure yourself from what you're looking to cure yourself from. The second thing I would say is ask yourself this question: what does my body need in order to heal? And be willing to look at the honest truth, because sometimes the answers that come up for people are not, I need to take that drug or I need to get that surgery. Sometimes those may very well be part of it, but it may be, I need to quit my job. I need to leave my husband. I need to move to Santa Fe and go to art school. So it requires a lot of courage to be able to face what that looks like. And then the third thing is take action. Write your own prescription. Figure out what it is that you need to do in order to make those changes in your life to alleviate loneliness or reduce work stress or become more optimistic or, deal with your depression and anxiety or change your life circumstances so that you are in a place to really optimize your body's self-healing response. How can you add more relaxation responses to your life, and then just do it.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Lissa Rankin, and I'm so delighted to be able to be here talking to the future of medicine. I was trained as a medical doctor with a very conventional background. I scrubbed in on my first surgery when I was 12. That my father set it up. I was always going to the hospital, so I was very, very much indoctrinated into this very conventional system. And I became very, very disillusioned with my medical practice and my role in it. Even the word healing was something that people were sort of resistant about. This was a time where I was very out of touch with intuition or any sensing capacity of the human potential. Faith was completely separate from intellect and logic and reason, and science and spirituality did not intermingle in my worldview, the way I grew up and the way I was educated. I saw myself like I was outside of myself watching, and I heard myself say to this guy, if I did my job the way you did your job, there'd be dead people everywhere. And then I was like, oh my God, I have become one of these people. But I did end up quitting my job as an OBGYN in 2007, so everybody really thought I was insane. And I still had this deep calling of being a healer, and I just didn't know what that meant anymore. I knew that it wasn't what I had been doing, but I didn't know what it was. And I started doing research, and I came across the Spontaneous Remission Project at the Institute of Noetic Sciences. And this is a database of over 3,500 case studies in the medical literature of patients who had spontaneous remissions from seemingly incurable illnesses. And these case studies in the medical literature, most of them were written up by physicians as sort of medical curiosities or medical miracles. And I got really curious, like, what was happening? Was there something that we could learn from these patients? And this led me down a rabbit hole. And I started researching spontaneous remissions. Anywhere between 18 and 80% of patients get better in clinical trials when they're given a sugar pill or a saline injection, or most effectively a placebo surgery, a fake surgery. So we discovered that there's something about belief. This is not from woo-woo journals. This is from very mainstream medical journals like the New England Journal of Medicine or the Journal of the American Medical Association. Well-researched data demonstrating that some combination of positive belief and the nurturing care of a healthcare provider, somebody in a white coat that we've given a lot of authority to, who is caring and loving, that when we combine that positive belief with that nurturing care, which is how I define the placebo effect, that something happens to the physical body that can look like a miracle, and maybe it is.
Problems, for our perspective, from a shamanic perspective, is kind of a spiritual illness perspective, and I'm saying that that is manifested in limbic dysfunction. What do the shamans say is wrong? They say this person has accumulated too many dark energies, dark spirits, and that's what they're coming for, is cleaning, cleaning, cleaning. So if we don't treat and clean these energies, the person gets sick. So what do? This is our maloka. We clean, we clean, we clean. So there is similar ideas throughout all the traditional cultures. Actually, here I am with the Zulu Sangoma in South Africa recently. They do ritual bathing, plant baths, vapor treatments. They're all about ritual cleansing and cleaning, that is a key to health. Do we have anything that parallels that in Western science? It turns out, yes, we do. In the psychoneuroimmunologic world, we have this concept of allostatic burden and load. So it's basically that our stress response system, which is very well defined and described at this stage by psychoneuroimmunology, is burdened over time by accumulated stress, modified and sometimes overburdened and sometimes maladaptive. I'm going fast because I got to go fast. So they have conditions. This is the kind of things, just multiple stresses. How do you measure allostatic load? They have a measurement. It's cortisol levels, adrenaline levels, inflammatory markers. These are all links of the immune system being overburdened by accumulated stress that's sitting and weighing on the system. PTSD, great example, okay, of an overburdened stress response system. Pretty clear. This is Russ. He came to down to the center a while back. Treated, got better. From the shamanic perspective, cleaning all the energies and the spirits of the war, that's what we did. So migraine, is looked at as a maladaptive response to stress, injury to the stress coping mechanism. Again, chronic fatigue syndrome and highest allostatic load. Here we see it taking shape and all these illnesses that kind of look kind of spiritual. This childhood, kids that will have their parents die. Here's all the measurements. Their HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis stress response system is marked, okay? Psychoneuroimmunology is the study of all this. Here's the brain. It's all very well described. This is the autonomic nervous system, very well described, connected to the whole thing, connected to digestion, connected to erectile dysfunction and all these other emotionally related problems that are so everywhere, connected to our emotions very directly. An expression of our subconscious body controlling our tears, our laughter, our digestion, our upset stomach, our nausea, our vomiting, our diarrhea. Sounds like an ayahuasca ceremony. Here's the limbic system again. There's the hypothalamus sitting in the middle, heading up the stress response system in the HP axis. And if you go to these other talks, that's psilocybin, there's a hypothalamus. There's other people, there it is. So accumulated energy, stress from childhood, maltreatment, psychological trauma leads to increased allostatic load. Allostatic load represents maladaptive functioning in our psychoneuroimmunologic apparatus. Leaves us with less capacity to cope with stress, et cetera, et cetera. So then it's like a stress response system for us. Ayahuasca in a proper ritual setting and icaros can be effective in cleaning accumulated stress damage, allostatic load burden, often resulting from emotional trauma. Epigenetics, I just want to touch on this. Epigenetics, the coding of the genes, okay? This is the coding of the genes, not the genes themselves. Very susceptible to lifestyle, nutrition, environmental toxicity, psychosocial stress. So now we see, and this is what gets imprinted. Here's them. Oh, it looks like, where is the imprinting happening during maternal imprinting, childhood trauma? Oh, it looks like it's the epigenetics, Attachment theory, these neglected monkeys, what's wrong with them? It's their epigenetics. Early life adversity associated with broad scope of lifelong and health and behavioral disorders. The study examines whether randomized blah, blah, blah. It's basically epigenetics, okay? That's what I want to tell you. It's a growing thing, epigenetic mechanism of depression and antidepressant action. So I think we should explore the possibility that we at the Ayahuasca Healing Centers are cleaning allostatic load, pathologically imprinted epigenetics from our emotional centers, which, by the way, are hardwired into our tears and our vomit, rapid limbic revision. That's what I want to say. And last thing I just want to say is spiritual health, where the rubber hits the road in embodied consciousness, is the emotional health is there. And so we see that. And so Jack Mabit is going to get much more into the spiritual technologies, as other people have talked about, or what we do in shamanism and in technology, but in a way that the larger community is going to understand. Emotional health is a place where that's marked. And our limbic system is there, and the epigenetic imprinting of the limbic system is there. So I think this should be a focus of some research. It seems interesting to me.
Of a gene called the reading gene. So this is the ticker tape of a reading gene, let's say. I say, well, what does epigenetics do? Well, I say epigenetics can alter that reading gene by cutting and pasting. So I can cut off part and make the read gene. I can cut off part, make the ding gene. I could cut off parts and make the add gene. And every time I'm doing that, I'm using the same blueprint, but I'm creating a new protein out of it. So what's the point? And the issue is simply this. For every gene in your body, using epigenetics, I can create greater than 3,000 different versions of the same protein. Some of those versions are healthy versions, And some of those versions are the equivalent of mutant versions. So, as a matter of fact, you don't have to have a mutant gene. You could have a mutant readout. Epigenetics could take a normal gene and turn it into a gene that reads as a cancer gene. And that's why we're beginning to find out a very important point. Cancer is only about 10% connected to heredity, 90% connected to the environment and your response. And the relevance, as you're quite aware, is simply this. If the signals from the environment are controlling the genetics, then I'm not a victim of my genes. If you wanted to say you were a victim of your environment, you could say that, but that's not true because of a simple reason. You can change the environment. You can change your response to life. You can change all of these. All of a sudden, the concept that you are a victim of your DNA is completely false. You are the master of your DNA. It's your perceptions that send signals to the genes. It's your emotions that send signals to the genes. It's the environment that you live in sends signals to the genes. And all of a sudden you realize, yeah, but I can change my emotions, I can change my perceptions, I can change my environment. And all of a sudden you realize, yeah, you are not restricted to a specific gene readout. You are free to change anything in your life. And this becomes very critical because you have to have self-empowerment. And Evan up here was a great example of self-empowerment. Okay, your body's now screwed up. What are you going to do about it? Self-empowerment. I'm not going to stop. I'm going to control my biology with my wishes, desires, and beliefs. And he did. And that's a great example of changing your life. So I go back and I say, what about that central dogma? DNA goes to RNA, goes to proteins. In all the textbooks, I go, yes, but they left out some pieces that are critical. What'd they leave out? Well, what about the chromosomal proteins, the regulatory proteins? Yeah, they control the reading of the DNA. Oh, you left them out of the story. And I go, yeah, but what controls the regulatory proteins? And the answer is the environmental signals. And all of a sudden, you don't live by the primacy of DNA. You actually are representing the primacy of the environment. And all of a sudden, it becomes very important for you to understand that you change the environmental signals, you change the expression of the protein at the bottom. Okay? So basically, I go back to my tissue culture study and I say, yeah, I put cells in a petri dish, change the environment, and I can change the fate of the cells, changing the culture medium. You say, yeah, but that's cells in a plastic dish, Lipton. What about cells in me? I go, well, here's the interesting fact about you. You see yourself as a single living entity, but the truth is, no, you are actually you're a skin-covered petri dish. You got 50 trillion cells inside your body. How does it work? And the answer is simply this. The cells respond to the culture medium. I go, what's the culture medium in your body? The answer is the blood. So I say, so if you change the chemical composition of the blood, it's the same as changing the culture medium in a plastic dish? I go, absolutely. To a cell, it doesn't make a difference if it's in a skin dish or a plastic dish. It's still going to respond to the environmental signal. I say, so the blood in your body is the culture medium. I go, yeah. And I say, what controls the chemistry of that culture medium? Because if you change the chemistry, you change the fate of the cells. I go, well, you read environmental signals with what? Their nervous system. It's perception. I perceive what's going on in the environment. But that's not the end of it, because the next level of control is more important. It's not just the nervous system response to stimulus response. It involves the mind. And why is the mind relevant? Mind is interpretation. And the significance of this, two people can be in the exact same environment, having the exact same influence of environmental signals, but with two different perceptions of what's going on, they have two different totally responses in their body. So all of a sudden, it's not the environment, it's your perception and your interpretation of the environment, which is the mind's role. And when the mind interprets, what it does is send signals back into the brain, and the brain releases chemicals that are matching the interpretation. And those chemicals are sent into the blood, or those chemicals are sent via the nervous system to the cells, and the relevance is at the cells, the signals, just like in a plastic dish, the signals control behavior and gene activity. And all of a sudden you see what's at the top of this whole thing is the mind. I go, well, what chemicals should the mind release? Well, I say, well, I was a cell biologist, but we are all, every one of us, self-biologists. And we are creating our biology. As it shows, the brain is creating the culture medium, the blood, and the culture medium is being used to feed the 50 trillion cells in your body. I say, well, what's relevant? I say this. You open your eyes, you see someone you love. Oh, when you see someone you love, what kind of chemicals go into blood? Dopamine, oxytocin, vasopressin, growth hormone. I say, why are those chemicals relevant? I can tell you a simple fact. If I take those chemicals, add them to my plastic petri dish of cells, the cells grow exuberantly well. I say, isn't that interesting? When people fall in love, they're so healthy they glow. Why is that? And the answer is the chemistry in their body is fulfilling the fullest growth potential of your cells in love. I say, well, what about the same person? They open their eyes, but they don't see someone they love. They see something that scares them. I say, oh, fear, that releases a completely different set of chemicals. When you're experiencing or perceiving, interpreting fear, you release stress hormones and inflammatory agents. I say, why relevant? I say, take the stress hormones, inflammatory agents, add them to the petri dish and plastic petri dish with cells, and guess what? The cells stop growing. And that's why fear kills. It's an effort of the system to conserve energy. So don't grow if you have to run away from the tiger. Stop growing and use that energy for escape. Well, it was only meant in history to run away from the saber-toothed tiger. Meaning, okay, you got 20 minutes, scare the hell out of you, and you get away from that tiger, and then guess what? You relax and you go back into growth again. But we don't have that in our world today. We have 24/7, 365 stress. That means every day you read the paper, you watch the TV, you do whatever you're doing. What are you doing? Releasing stress hormones into your body. From your what? Interpretation. Same body, you could look at something and be in love and have a completely different vision. And all of a sudden you realize you were the master, but we have let other people control our interpretations. And as a result, their interpretations control our lives. And we have been disempowered by that.